They said the same words every time. We value you, Eva, but you know how it is. Budget constraints. 8 years. 8 years of late nights, record profits, and next quarter promises. I generated more revenue in my division than any other manager. Proved it in numbers so clear they could have been tattooed on the quarterly report. Yet every raise request died the same death. Politely, quietly, behind HR's smile. Meanwhile, the guys in the golf club photos? Their promotions came with champagne and catered lunches. Mine came with Team Pizza Fridays and a $25 gift card to the same cafe where I worked weekends just to breathe. I used to think loyalty meant something, that if I just worked harder, they'd notice. That's the kind of lie companies love, because it keeps you quiet. The first crack in the illusion came during the annual review 3 years ago. Greg, the same boss who'd take credit for my team's innovation, leaned back in his leather chair and said, "Eva, you're indispensable, but you're too valuable to promote. If you move up, who'll hold this place together?" That's when I realized I wasn't being rewarded for keeping the company stable. I was being punished for it. So I started building something of my own, quietly. It began as a late-night idea, half rebellion, half therapy. A workflow platform that automated what I'd been doing manually for years, predicting revenue dips before they happened, optimizing logistics across departments, cutting human error down to nearly zero. I called it Pulse. Every line of code was written on my personal laptop. No company servers, no office Wi-Fi, no borrowed tools. Just me, coffee, and the hum of the refrigerator at 2 a.m. At first, it was just a secret. My secret. I'd tell myself it was a technical experiment, something to keep my brain from rusting. But it grew. Fast. I started testing Pulse on dummy data, and the results were ridiculous. A system that took our analysts a week could now run in 90 seconds. I kept it quiet. At work, I stayed the reliable workhorse. The Rock, as Greg liked to call me when he needed something impossible done overnight. I smiled, nodded, stayed late, and hit every impossible target. I let him believe I was burning out. The truth? I was burning brighter than I ever had. Then came the promotion that broke me. We'd just closed a multi-million-dollar logistics contract, the kind that should have doubled my department's value overnight. I spent 3 months negotiating, rewriting projections, saving the company a small fortune in penalties. The ink was barely dry when Greg called everyone into the conference room. "Let's give it up for Adam," he said, clapping like a seal. He's the future of this department. Adam, who had joined 6 months ago. Adam, whose most notable contribution was a broken spreadsheet. Everyone clapped. Even me. That's what you do when your survival depends on pretending you're okay. That night, I didn't cry. I coded. Pulse evolved from prototype to platform. I started incorporating machine learning, pattern recognition, predictive scaling, automated reporting. Within a year, it could run a mid-sized company's entire operations in real time. Quietly, efficiently, invisibly. Still, I stayed silent. Because I knew what would happen if Greg found out. He'd call it collaboration. HR would call it company property. And I'd be erased from my own creation before sunrise. Then, one Tuesday morning, it happened. I got an email from a small publication called TechFront Weekly. Subject line: "Congratulations on the Pulse beta launch. We'd love to feature you." I blinked. My hand froze over the mouse. I hadn't launched anything publicly. Turns out a freelance journalist had found my open source demo on a startup forum, recognized its potential, and written a glowing piece. It was already trending on LinkedIn. By noon, 3 companies had sent partnership inquiries. One of them was backed by a major VC. By 2 p.m., my phone lit up with a message from Greg. "Eva, urgent, come to the boardroom." Now I walked in, still wearing my noise-canceling headphones around my neck like armor. Greg sat at the head of the table, red-faced, surrounded by legal and two board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. He didn't waste time. You built this Pulse thing while employed here? That makes it ours. He leaned back, smirked. We own your code, sweetheart. The word sweetheart hit like a spark to gasoline. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because I knew something he didn't. In my folder, my quiet little war chest, was my original employment contract. Page 4, Clause 9.2. The employee retains ownership of all intellectual property developed independently and outside employer-compensated hours, using non-company resources. It was the kind of clause they'd removed years ago for new hires, but no one ever updated mine. As Greg started talking about legal implications and fiduciary obligations, I smiled. The kind of smile you wear like armor, because I knew this was just the beginning. And when the lawyer read that one line, when his face went ghostly pale, everything they thought they owned would crumble. But that's a story for tomorrow. Because tonight I'd earned my first quiet victory. I finally built something they couldn't steal. The next morning, the office felt different. Or maybe I did. When I walked in, conversations stopped half a beat too early. A few people looked up from their screens, then quickly looked back down. Slack was quieter than usual, except for a single message from my teammate Carla. Greg's been pacing since 8. You okay? I replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. Because what could I say? Yeah, totally fine. Just apparently triggered a corporate meltdown by existing. By 9:30, Greg called me into his office. The door clicked shut behind me like the start of an interrogation. He smiled the way people do when they're angry but trying to sound reasonable. Ava, you should have told us about this little side project. It's independent, I said calmly. Outside hours, my own hardware. He nodded slowly like he was explaining something to a child. Perception matters. When leadership sees a manager launching a product, it raises questions. Like, are you fully committed to this company? There it was. The word committed. The same word they use when they want you to feel guilty for wanting more. I stayed quiet. Greg leaned forward. We're all a team here, Eva. You know I've always supported your career, but we need transparency. So send over your codebase and repo link to legal. Just so we're clear. My pulse didn't rise. I just said, no. His smile cracked. Excuse me? It's my personal property, I said. Clause 9.2. You signed it when I joined. For a second, his eyes flickered, like he wasn't sure if I was bluffing. Then he laughed, soft and condescending. Those old contracts don't hold up. Our policies have evolved. Then it's good mine hasn't, I said, standing up. I walked out before he could answer. By lunchtime, HR had emailed me a friendly reminder about company loyalty and intellectual property protection. Legal requested voluntary disclosure of any independent projects. The subject line read, "Let's clarify before it gets complicated." It was already complicated. Carla stopped by my desk mid-afternoon, whispering, "They're freaking out." I overheard Greg talking to the VP, something about controlling the narrative before investors see it. Investors? I repeated. She nodded. Apparently, the board's been on edge since that article dropped. Some clients even reached out to them directly, asking if Pulse is part of our platform. I nearly laughed. The irony was perfect. For 8 years, they'd refused to give me a raise because I supposedly didn't bring enough value. Now they were panicking because I brought too much. That evening, I stayed late. Not for them, but for me. I logged into Pulse, reviewing the metrics from the test clients who had already reached out. The numbers were incredible. Response times down 60%, predictive accuracy up 40%. My code was performing better than I'd ever hoped. Then came a message on LinkedIn. Raymond, HealthStream CTO. Congrats on the coverage. We'd love to discuss early adoption if you're open. My hands shook slightly as I typed back, happy to talk. Let's set a call. When I finally closed my laptop, it was past 11. The cleaning crew was mopping near the elevators, and the office smelled like bleach and coffee grounds. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small walking through that hallway. The next morning, HR scheduled an urgent sync. They smiled too much, like hosts on a game show. "We understand your perspective, Eva," said Nora from HR, her voice syrupy smooth. "But your employment agreement implies a duty of loyalty. Launching a public product could appear conflicting." I took a breath. "Duty of loyalty doesn't override a signed clause." She blinked. "Clause?" 9.2, I said. "Page 4. Behind her, the company lawyer shifted uncomfortably. He knew. They exchanged glances. Nora smiled again, tighter this time. "Well, let's not make this adversarial. Leadership values you. Leadership values results," I said. "That's what Pulse delivers." By the time I left the room, the entire HR floor had gone silent. That evening, Carla called. "Eva, rumor is Greg's setting up a board meeting. He said your project jeopardizes company interests." I stared out my apartment window at the city lights flickering like static. "Let him," I said. I spent the next few hours preparing. Backups of Pulse on 3 drives, server logs timestamped from my personal IP, screenshots of every commit, every GitHub update, all after hours. The evidence was airtight. Still, part of me trembled. Not from fear, but anticipation. I'd been quiet for so long that confrontation felt like a new language. Just after midnight, a new email arrived. From Greg. Subject: boardroom, 9 a.m. Sharp body. Bring your project details and your contract. No greeting, no signature. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. For 8 years, they'd told me I wasn't worth a raise. Tomorrow, they'd learn how expensive underestimating me could be. I packed the printed contract into a red folder, the same one that held every ignored raise request, every "not this quarter" email, my quiet history of being invisible. Then I closed my laptop and turned off the lights. The city outside was restless, humming. So was I. Tomorrow wasn't just another workday. It was the day everything changed. They didn't even bother putting it on my calendar. At 8:07 a.m., I got a short message from the executive admin. "Please be in conference room A at 9 a.m. per CEO request." No subject, no agenda, no attachments, just that single line. It read less like an invite and more like a summons. When I arrived, the atmosphere hit like static before a storm. Greg was at the head of the table, flanked by 2 board members and a company lawyer I'd only seen once before. Thin, expensive suit, expression like wet cement. A carafe of untouched coffee sat between them. "Eva," Greg said, forcing a smile. "Glad you could make it." I sat across from him, placing my red folder on the table. He clasped his hands like a man pretending to lead a therapy session. "We're here to have a professional conversation about this Pulse situation." "Situation?" I asked. Greg leaned back. "You've developed software while under contract. Software that overlaps with company operations. That creates a conflict of interest and—" "Overlap?" I interrupted. "Pulse optimizes cross-departmental efficiency. Your company sells shipping analytics. They're not the same thing." The lawyer cleared his throat. "They operate in adjacent verticals, which could constitute intellectual property interference." I almost laughed. They'd clearly rehearsed this. Greg continued, "Look, nobody wants this to get ugly. Just hand over your repository and we'll figure out a fair solution. You'll be compensated, of course." "Compensated," I repeated. "Like the raises I never got?" His smile thinned. "Don't make this emotional, Eva." "I'm not," I said. "I'm being factual." A faint muscle jumped in his jaw. "You built it on company time." "No," I said simply. "All logs, commits, and data show work completed outside paid hours. All from my personal hardware. I can prove it." Greg turned to the lawyer. "Tell her how this works." The lawyer began, voice steady, detached. Under standard employment law, any invention conceived during employment that relates to company business can be considered the employer's property. He paused for effect, looking at me. Even if developed off-site. I didn't move. Standard law doesn't override signed contracts. He blinked. Pardon? I opened my folder, sliding a document across the table. My original employment agreement, page 4, clause 9.2. Greg frowned, glancing at it, then waved for the lawyer to read it. The lawyer scanned the page, eyes moving slowly. Halfway down, his posture shifted. He read the sentence again, slower. His face lost color. Greg noticed. What? What does it say? The lawyer hesitated. It states that any intellectual property developed independently and outside employer-compensated hours remains the sole property of the employee. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Greg's brows furrowed. That clause doesn't exist in our contracts. It does in mine, I said. Yours has your signature on it, right there. He grabbed the paper, skimmed it, then looked up at the lawyer. You're telling me this is still enforceable? The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. If this document is valid, and it appears to be, then yes. Legally, Pulse belongs to her. Greg's face flushed crimson. This is absurd. She built it while on our payroll. Using her own equipment outside business hours, the lawyer replied. Your clause explicitly allows that. The board members exchanged looks. One coughed. The other adjusted his tie and said quietly, We never updated the legacy agreements after the merger. Greg turned to me, his voice tight. You planned this. I read what I signed, I said. You should try it sometime. His hand twitched against the table. You're violating the spirit of company loyalty. Loyalty? I said softly. I gave you 8 years. I trained your hires, saved your contracts, brought in record profits. You rewarded me with excuses and coffee vouchers. No one spoke. Even the air conditioner seemed to hesitate. Finally, the older board member cleared his throat. Greg, you've put the company in a very delicate position. Greg turned, desperate. We can't just let her walk away with this. The code could compete with us. The lawyer folded the document neatly. Then you should have renegotiated her contract years ago. A knock on the door interrupted the silence. Everyone turned. The CEO stepped in, not a man who attended many meetings. He was tall, calm, carrying a tablet. What's going on here? He asked. Greg stood quickly. We've got an IP issue, sir. Eva here launched a product that infringes. The CEO held up a hand. I've read the clause. Legal briefed me. He turned to me. You built Pulse? Yes, I said. He nodded once, slowly. Then congratulations. It's impressive work, Greg stared, stunned. Wait, you're siding with her? The CEO's tone sharpened. I'm acknowledging competence. Something this leadership team apparently failed to do for nearly a decade, Greg's mouth opened, but no words came out. The CEO looked around the table. This meeting's over. And just like that, it was. Greg's pen slipped from his hand and rolled across the table. The lawyer packed his briefcase. The board members avoided eye contact. I gathered my folder, slid it into my bag, and stood. Greg finally managed. You'll regret this. I looked at him, calm and steady. No, Greg. You will. As I walked out, the hallway felt strangely quiet, like the building itself knew something had shifted. For the first time in years, the weight on my shoulders wasn't theirs. It was mine, and it was power. By the time I reached my desk, the whispers had already started. People glanced up from their screens, then looked away too quickly. Carla mouthed, What happened? Across the cubicle divider. I just shook my head. There was no way to explain what had just occurred in that boardroom without sounding like I'd walked out of a courtroom instead of a meeting. Greg's door stayed shut for the rest of the morning. Occasionally, I'd catch his shadow pacing behind the frosted glass. Legal passed by twice, one of them holding my contract like it was evidence from a crime scene. At 11:20, an all-staff email hit inboxes. Subject: clarification on recent media mentions. Our company supports innovation and independent creativity among employees. However, we want to reaffirm that collaboration and communication are key values. Please direct any external inquiries to the Communications Department translation. Greg was trying to control the fire. I didn't reply, didn't post, didn't even log on to LinkedIn. I just focused on my work. Well, technically, my former work. Because deep down, I knew my time here was already over. Around noon, Carla appeared beside my desk with 2 coffees. I heard from someone in HR, she whispered. Greg's losing it. He told the VP you blindsided him? I smiled faintly. He blindsided himself. I just brought the paperwork. She exhaled slowly. You're kind of a legend right now. Half the office is rooting for you. That surprised me more than it should have. For years, I'd been invisible. Dependable, silent, uncomplaining. Now people saw me. Not as a team player, but as someone who finally stopped playing. By 3 p.m., I received an email from HR. Subject: exit discussion. Ava, please meet with HR tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. to discuss next steps regarding your transition. Transition, the corporate word for exile. I left the office quietly, avoiding eye contact, the folder still tucked under my arm like armor. Outside, the air was crisp, sharp with early winter. My hands trembled, not with fear, but adrenaline. That night, I opened my personal laptop and checked my inbox. Pulse's mailbox was overflowing. Partnership inquiries, demo requests, even one from a regional bank wanting to license a beta version. And there it was, an email from Charles Greer, the company's lead investor. Saw the board notes. I'd like to speak directly. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., call me. Greer was the kind of man who didn't speak often, but made people nervous when he did. I'd only seen him once during an all-hands years ago, his face projected on a giant screen as he congratulated Greg's leadership. Now he wanted to talk to me. I barely slept that night. Not from anxiety, but from ideas. Pulse wasn't just a side project anymore. It was alive, breathing, attracting attention. For the first time, I wasn't chasing validation. I was chasing possibility. The next morning, HR looked almost relieved when I walked in. Eva, thank you for coming, said Nora, offering a smile too polished to be genuine. We've spoken with leadership, and we've mutually decided that a graceful transition is best for everyone. Meaning you're firing me? I said. Not at all, she replied quickly. We're offering a separation package, 3 months' pay, a positive reference, and continued benefits. I folded my hands. And if I refuse? Her smile didn't waver. Then we might need to reevaluate certain clauses about competitive overlap. There it was, the threat beneath the sugar. I leaned forward. Clause 9.2 still stands. You can't touch Pulse. You can't even imply you own part of it. And if you try, I'll take that to court. And the press. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Nora cleared her throat. We'll process your separation today. An hour later, my access badge stopped working. My inbox was deactivated. My corporate phone buzzed once before locking itself out. Just like that, 8 years of work vanished into the company's servers, archived under former employees. But it didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It felt clean, like stepping out of a cage I hadn't realized I'd built around myself. That evening, I called Charles Greer. His voice was calm, low, deliberate. I read your contract, he said without preamble. Greg's leadership has been a liability for a while. You handled yourself well. Thank you, I said carefully. I'm not calling to offer sympathy, he continued. I'm calling to offer investment. Pulse is smart, scalable. You built something they couldn't even recognize when it was right under their noses. I'd like to back it. Properly. For a moment, I couldn't speak. You want to invest? In me? In Pulse. he said, then paused. But yes, in you too. You've got what this company lost years ago. Clarity. He sent a term sheet before the call even ended. After hanging up, I sat in my small apartment surrounded by empty coffee mugs and outdated company awards, staring at the screen. My hands shook as I signed the NDA and the preliminary agreement. I thought I'd feel triumph, maybe vindication. Instead, I felt something quieter. Freedom. That night, I poured a glass of wine, sat on my balcony, and watched the city lights flicker below. Somewhere in that skyline, Greg was probably still drafting angry emails, trying to convince the board I was the villain. Let him. Because tomorrow the press would publish a headline neither of us could rewrite. Former operations manager's AI platform raises seed round led by Greer Ventures. And for once, I wouldn't be the one left clapping in the background. The morning the article went live, my phone didn't stop buzzing. It started with a ping from TechFront Weekly. Eva Jensen, former operations manager at CoreAxis, secures early funding for Pulse AI, an independent workflow optimization platform. By 9 a.m., it was everywhere. The same company that once denied me every raise was now trending because their ex-employee had outbuilt them. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. LinkedIn notifications exploded. Hundreds of comments, connection requests, congratulations from people who had never spoken to me once in 8 years. And mixed among them, a single message from Greg. Ava, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand, I didn't reply. By noon, Pulse's website crashed under traffic. My inbox was flooded with inquiries, beta requests, partnership offers, job applications. It was chaos. The good kind. The kind that comes after years of being overlooked. Carla texted me from the office. He's losing it. He called an emergency meeting. HR is panicking. Someone said the investors are investigating leadership practices. I typed back, tell them I wish them the best. That night, Greer called again. His voice was calm, measured. Ava, I've received more interest in Pulse today than in half our portfolio last quarter. We're moving fast. The board wants to announce your first funding round tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? I said, barely believing it. Yes. And Eva, he added, don't apologize for being ready. When the call ended, I sat in the dark for a while, the city lights blinking outside like patient metronomes. I thought of the nights I'd spent staring at code until my eyes ached, the weekends I'd carried Greg's projects while he played golf, the birthdays I'd worked through because the team needs you. For the first time, all of it felt worth it. Still, a part of me needed closure. Not revenge, just clarity. So I sent Greg one final email. I appreciate the opportunities I had at CoreAxis. I learned a lot about leadership, mostly what it shouldn't look like. Best of luck to you and the team. No bitterness, no accusation, just a quiet truth. He never replied. 2 days later, Pulse officially launched. The demo went live, sleek and polished, running on servers I'd configured myself. Within hours, the analytics dashboard lit up. 23,000 visits, 3,000 signups, 7 enterprise inquiries. Then came the call I didn't expect. CoreAxis's CEO. Eva, he said, his tone cautious, almost respectful. You've built something impressive. I want you to know there are no hard feelings. I waited. There was always a but. But, he continued, Greg's resigned effective immediately. The board wasn't happy with how he handled the situation. They asked me to pass along that you're welcome back if you ever want to return in an advisory capacity. I almost laughed. You're offering me a job at the company that tried to take my work? Not a job, he said quickly. A partnership. I smiled to myself. I already have one. It's with myself. He hesitated, then sighed. Well, congratulations, Eva. Truly, when we hung up, I closed my laptop and leaned back. The apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator, the same sound that had kept me company during those long nights of coding. Later that evening, Carla called. You won't believe this, she said, half laughing. Greg's meltdown made it into the investor report. Someone leaked that board meeting transcript. The claws, the lawyer turning pale, everything I exhaled. I didn't want it to be public. I know, she said. But everyone's reading it like a survival guide. You just proved it's possible to fight back and win. That night, I walked to the small cafe near my old office, the one where I used to spend my lunch breaks rewriting other people's mistakes. The barista still remembered my order. Haven't seen you in a while, she said. New chapter, I told her. I sat by the window, sipping my coffee, watching employees in Core Axis lanyards rush down the street. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just a quiet distance, like watching a life I'd already outgrown. My phone buzzed again. Greer had sent the press release draft. Pulse AI secures $2.4 million seed funding to redefine workflow automation. Founded by Eva Jensen, whose resilience and innovation exemplify the next era of leadership, I read it twice, then 3 times, because no matter how many times I saw it, it didn't quite feel real yet. Leadership. The word they'd used against me for years. Now it was mine. Before heading home, I took a detour past the Core Axis building. Through the glass walls, I saw Greg's office. Empty. Lights off. His nameplate had already been removed. I stood there for a moment, not out of gloating, but reflection. The place that once defined my worth was now just another address. I whispered, "Thank you," under my breath. Not to them, but to the version of me who stayed patient long enough to outgrow that room. When I finally turned away, the air felt lighter. The truth was, I didn't win by fighting them. I won by outlasting them. I walked home with my hands in my pockets, the city humming around me, my future wide open. And as I passed the old bus stop where I used to check emails at midnight, I thought of the line Greg once said, "You're too valuable to promote." He was right. I was too valuable. Just not for them. The first time I realized how fragile power is, it wasn't during some boardroom meltdown or midnight system crash. It was at 2:37 a.m., alone in a humming office, when I caught the CEO's son-in-law approving a $240,000 consulting transfer to a company that didn't exist. I didn't say anything that night. I just stared at the glowing screen, listening to the low whir of the air conditioner and the rhythmic buzz of fluorescent lights, and quietly took a screenshot. Old habits die hard. See, I'm not one of those loud, performative geniuses who announce every contribution on LinkedIn. I'm the type who makes sure things work. Payroll, procurement, inventory. All the digital veins of this company ran through my hands. I built the automation systems, maintained the analytics backend, and patched the same outdated architecture the executives kept calling innovation. When something broke, I fixed it. When someone else broke it, I fixed it faster. And for 5 years, that's all I did, until he arrived. Marcus, the CEO's golden son-in-law. Fresh MBA, shiny watch, ego that could power half the building. His job title, Director of Digital Strategy, which in corporate translation meant make noise, take credit, and spend other people's time fixing your mistakes. The first thing he did was ask, "So, you're the IT lady?" I corrected him. "Head of Systems Architecture." He smirked. Cute. "Maybe someday you'll get a real title." That was the tone for the next 6 months. He strutted through hallways with buzzwords dripping from his mouth. Disruption, synergy, digital transformation, while I sat quietly behind a wall of monitors, keeping the company's fragile nervous system alive. Every time his flashy projects glitched, my team fixed it before he noticed. He called it teamwork. I called it cleaning his mess. I should have known it would explode eventually. It started small. The company began bleeding money from unexplained strategy consulting expenses. When I traced the payments, they looped through layers of dummy vendors, each registered under the same IP address. His, I had proof. But in corporate life, truth means nothing if it embarrasses family. So, I archived it quietly, just in case. A week later, I requested to enroll in a new cybersecurity certification, one designed to tighten internal audit trails. I submitted the cost breakdown, flagged it as mandatory compliance training. Approved automatically, as usual. 2 days later, Marcus stormed into my office. His shirt was too white, his smile too wide. "Linda," he said, tossing a printout of my expense report onto my desk. "You're stealing from the company." For a moment, I thought he was joking. Then I saw the email header, forwarded from his father-in-law, the CEO himself. "I followed a course," I said slowly. "It's required to keep the company's system certifications active." He leaned closer, eyes sharp with something between arrogance and insecurity. "You don't decide what's required." "I do, and you're done here." I didn't flinch. Years of quiet survival in corporate trenches had trained me for this exact moment. The calm before the fire. "You're firing me?" "Effective immediately," he said, straightening his tie like it made him powerful. "Security's on the way." "Hand over your badge," I smiled. Not the kind of smile people give when they're defeated, but the quiet, deliberate one that says, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." I took off my lanyard, placed the badge gently on his desk, and said, "You have exactly 10 minutes before your main system crashes." "Tell your father-in-law I said good luck." He laughed, that hollow, dismissive laugh people use when they don't understand what's about to hit them. Then he saw my eyes, and the laughter stopped. Because behind me, on the wall of screens, every dashboard flickered. Payroll, logistics, and internal compliance, all blinking amber. Warning signals he didn't even recognize. "You're bluffing," he said. "Am I?" I replied softly, packing my things. He didn't move. He didn't even call security. He just stood there, face pale, fingers frozen midair like he wanted to type something but didn't know where to begin. As I walked out, the office was unusually quiet. The kind of silence that happens right before a storm. Heavy, suspended, waiting. What Marcus didn't know was that the course he accused me of stealing wasn't just training. It was a certification granting full encryption authority over the company's infrastructure. A safeguard I'd installed 2 years earlier after a ransomware scare. One that required reauthorization every 6 months. By firing me, he hadn't just removed an employee. He had cut the only lifeline keeping the system stable. 10 minutes later, his world would start flickering. Invoices stuck in loops, vendor payments freezing mid-transfer, warehouses locking down automatically due to system integrity warnings. But I didn't need to see it. I'd already seen this pattern too many times before. Power built on ignorance always collapses. And Marcus? He'd just hit the button himself. As I stepped into the elevator, the lights dimmed for half a second. Just a flicker. But it was enough. Somewhere upstairs, Marcus was realizing that when you accuse the wrong person of theft, sometimes what you lose isn't money. It's everything holding your empire together. And that was just the beginning. The elevator doors slid shut behind me, and for the first time in 7 years, I didn't have to swipe a badge to leave. It felt strange, liberating and hollow all at once. I had no plan, no next job lined up, no exit interview, no "we'll stay in touch." Just silence. The kind of silence that follows betrayal. Outside, the morning air was sharp with the smell of rain and exhaust. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the building through the windshield. Inside those mirrored windows, hundreds of people were starting their workday, sipping coffee, scrolling through emails, completely unaware that in less than an hour, the systems they relied on were about to choke on their own arrogance. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply done my job. Too well, maybe. Everything in that company, from payroll to product logistics, was built on a fragile web of integrations I'd designed to be secure, transparent, and maintainable. If maintained properly. The keyword Marcus never understood. When he fired me, he invalidated my certification keys, the same keys tied to every internal encryption license. Without a certified administrator, the system couldn't reauthorize critical operations. It would start locking down automatically, piece by piece, like a nervous system losing connection to its brain. 10 minutes, I'd told him. That wasn't a threat. It was math. Still, I didn't want to see it unfold. I started the car, pulled out of the lot, and drove aimlessly through downtown. My phone buzzed twice. An automated ping from my off-site server. Key rotation detected. Root admin missing. Then a second message. Auto protection mode active. Translation. Atlas 9, the company's infrastructure backbone, was now sealing itself. By the time I stopped for coffee 15 minutes later, I could already imagine the scene unfolding back inside. Marcus would be standing in the control room pretending to know what he was looking at. He'd probably call IT support first. Brad, the junior tech who once asked me how to change an HDMI input. Brad would panic, of course, because every command he typed would come back with access denied. Missing root signature, Marcus would then call finance, asking why vendor payments weren't processing. They'd say the system froze mid-transaction. HR would report that the payroll batch hadn't generated. Logistics would say their root management dashboard just went blank. And somewhere, his phone would buzz with a message from his father-in-law, the CEO. What the hell did you do? I could picture it vividly. Marcus pacing, sweating through his designer shirt, snapping at people who didn't deserve it. He'd blame legacy code, then server latency, then me. Of course he'd blame me. By the time I finished my coffee, my stomach had settled into that odd calm that comes only after chaos. I didn't want revenge. Not really. I just wanted peace. A concept foreign to anyone who's ever been trapped inside a corporate machine that rewards noise over substance. For years, I'd watched people like Marcus rise while people like me kept things alive from the shadows. When systems ran smoothly, the execs congratulated themselves. When things broke, they needed a scapegoat. The quiet ones always made the best targets. I tossed my cup, started the car again, and headed home. My apartment was small. One bedroom, minimal furniture, walls lined with books and backup drives. The kind of place you live in when you spend most of your life inside systems instead of sunlight. My laptop blinked awake the second I opened it. The dashboard lit up, displaying system status updates. Atlas 9 integrity check? Critical. Backup environment? Safe. I watched the graphs drop, not with satisfaction, but inevitability. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. At 10:03 a.m., my phone lit up again. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again. Then again. Then a message popped up. Marcus. What did you do? I typed one line back. You fired the wrong person. No reply. 2 minutes later, another notification arrived. Not from him this time, but from one of my old team members, Clara. She was sharp, honest, the only one who ever thanked me for staying late. Linda, what's happening? Systems are going down everywhere. They said you're gone. I hesitated, then replied, tell them to check the license ledger. The expiration date. It's not sabotage. It's compliance, a pause. Then, so, it's true? They really fired you? Yeah. Then we're screwed. I stared at the message for a while before setting the phone aside. It wasn't my problem anymore. I'd built safety nets, backups, even documentation that Marcus never bothered to read. I'd done everything right, except protect myself from people who didn't value competence. By 10:47 a.m., social media was buzzing. Employees were tweeting about internal outages and data loss. A post appeared on LinkedIn. Westline Corp experiences unexpected system failure. Operations halted. The news spread fast. Investors panicked. I refreshed the feed once more before closing the laptop. The thing about systems, digital or human, is that they collapse the same way. Slowly, then all at once. And as much as I wanted to feel triumphant, all I felt was tired. I looked around my apartment. The quiet hum of the fridge, the pale light filtering through blinds. This was peace. The kind that didn't need applause or validation. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because people like Marcus don't just fall quietly. They scramble. They look for someone to blame, to fix what they broke. And when his father-in-law realized the extent of the damage, the frozen accounts, the halted deliveries, the missing authorizations, he wouldn't be asking what happened. He'd be asking one question only. Where's Linda? By the next morning, my inbox looked like a siren. 47 new messages. Half from old coworkers, half from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't open any of them. I already knew what they said. Some version of, please come back, or what the hell did you do? I made coffee, the cheap kind that tasted like burnt paper, and watched the morning news in the background. By 8:15, the story had broken. Westline Corporation reports a critical system failure. Payroll, logistics, and client operations halted due to an internal technical error. Technical error. That phrase made me laugh. Marcus must have written the statement himself. I muted the TV and opened my laptop. My off-site monitor showed what I expected. The company's main framework, Atlas 9, was in quarantine mode. It hadn't crashed. It had locked itself exactly as designed. Without valid administrator credentials, every automation module, every vendor connection, every payment portal was frozen in self-protection. Marcus had fired the only certified operator. The system wasn't broken. It was simply waiting for someone who no longer existed in its world. At 8:32, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. Linda, it's Clara. Her voice was low, tense. They're panicking upstairs. Marcus is losing it. I rubbed my temple. How bad? Payroll's offline. Vendor contracts are stuck in draft status, and the CEO's assistant said Marcus hasn't left his office since last night. He keeps saying he can fix it. Of course he does. Arrogance always outlives logic. Listen, Clara whispered. I shouldn't be calling you, but is there any way to unlock Atlas? There is, I said quietly. But they'd need to contact the certification board and file an emergency request. It'll take days, maybe weeks. She sighed, the kind of sigh that carries exhaustion and disbelief in equal measure. He's not telling the CEO that part. He's saying it's just a glitch. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. By noon, a second article appeared online. Internal sources claim Westline's digital operations were tied to a single architect who was recently terminated. Someone had talked. Maybe finance, maybe logistics. It didn't matter. The story was out. And with it, the cracks in Marcus's shiny reputation were starting to show. I imagined the CEO, Richard Wallace, pacing in his glass office, veins tightening around his temples as he connected the dots. He wasn't stupid. Ruthless, yes, but not stupid. He'd built Westline from a small manufacturing firm into a multi-million-dollar distribution empire. He knew the difference between bad code and bad leadership. And right now, he was realizing that his son-in-law had fired the one person keeping his company functional. At 2:04 p.m., a black SUV parked outside my apartment. I saw it from the window. Tinted windows, corporate plates. A minute later, a knock. Firm, official. I opened the door halfway. It wasn't HR or security. It was Richard himself. Linda, he said, voice even but strained. We need to talk. He looked different up close. Older, heavier, the confidence dulled by sleeplessness. His tie was crooked, his eyes rimmed red. Surprised you know where I live, I said. I checked the HR records before the system went dark, he replied. Can I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in, glancing around my small apartment like he couldn't process how the person who built his empire's digital spine lived so modestly. He didn't sit right away. He just stood there, studying me. I need to ask, he said finally. Did you do this intentionally? No, I said. You did. He frowned. Excuse me? You let someone with no technical background fire the only certified administrator connected to a system built around compliance locks. The system's doing what it's supposed to, protecting itself. He sighed and sank into the armchair across from me. I trusted him. Marcus said you were misusing company funds. He didn't understand the expense reports, I replied. Those funds were federal-grade licenses. Without them, your automation pipeline doesn't even meet audit standards. Richard rubbed his forehead. How long until everything stops completely? Some of it already has, I said. The rest will go into idle mode within 48 hours. Silence filled the room. Only the faint hum of my laptop fan broke it. Then he said quietly, Can you fix it? I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who'd ignored me for years, who'd walked past me in hallways without learning my last name, who only noticed my existence when it threatened his bottom line. I could, I said, but I won't. His eyes snapped up. You're angry? I get that, but people's jobs are on the line. People's jobs were always on the line, I interrupted. I stayed late every night making sure no one missed a paycheck because your golden son-in-law rerouted budget approvals through a sandbox account. I protected this company from his mistakes, and you let him call me a thief. Richard exhaled slowly, like a man finally understanding the cost of arrogance. I can pay you. It's not about money, I said. It's about respect. You built a company that rewards noise over skill. You let a man who can't read a system log decide who's valuable. He stared at the floor. So that's it? That's it. He stood, adjusted his tie, and nodded once. You're a remarkable woman, Linda. I wish I'd realized it sooner. Most people do, I said softly. He left without another word. The SUV door shut, engine humming low as it pulled away. That night, I sat by the window watching city lights flicker like dying servers. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Clara. CEO just walked out of a board meeting. They're saying the losses could hit 7 figures. Marcus disappeared. I read it twice, then turned the phone face down. The truth was, I didn't take joy in their downfall. I just couldn't save people who refused to see the fire until they were standing in the smoke. Sometimes collapse isn't destruction. It's correction. And Westline was finally correcting itself. The following Monday started like any other. Gray skies, cold coffee, inbox full of noise. But this time, I wasn't the one holding the system together. I was watching it unravel from a distance. At 7:15 a.m., a notification popped up on one of my private dashboards. I'd left it active, not for revenge, but because part of me couldn't look away. Old habits die slow. The alert said, Atlas 9, emergency mode initiated, primary operations halted. Translation? The company was in free fall. A few minutes later, a message from Clara appeared. They brought in outside consultants. 3 firms. Nobody can get access. Every portal requires your biometric key. Marcus hasn't been seen since Friday. I read it twice. Trying to feel something. Guilt, satisfaction, regret. Nothing came. Just a steady, quiet calm. The kind that comes after surviving a storm you didn't start. Still, I opened a live feed of Westline's internal network status. Most of the servers were flashing red, a few orange, and a handful gray. Shut down by choice, I guessed, in a desperate attempt to isolate the damage. But there was no damage. Not really. The system wasn't broken. It was obeying. I'd designed it that way. The longer I looked, the more I realized how fragile everything had been all along. It didn't take sabotage to destroy a company. Just ignorance and arrogance in the same room. By mid-morning, my phone rang again. It wasn't Clara this time. The caller ID said unknown. Against my better judgment, I answered. Linda Taylor? The voice was crisp, professional. This is Thomas Grant from the board of Westline Corporation. We'd like to discuss a potential consulting arrangement. I smiled slightly. There it was, the inevitable call. I'm listening, I said. The situation is serious, he continued. We've lost access to nearly every operational system. Vendors are panicking. Payroll's frozen. Legal says we could face penalties if deliveries don't resume. We understand you were the system architect. I was, I corrected him. Past tense. He hesitated. We'd be willing to offer a substantial consulting fee for your immediate return, just until the system stabilizes. How substantial? 5 figures. I almost laughed. They were losing millions, and they were offering me what they'd pay a marketing intern for a month of work. Mr. Grant, I said evenly, what's happening right now isn't a crash. It's a security measure. Atlas 9 requires reauthorization through the same certified account that built it. That account no longer exists. He cleared his throat. So it can't be reversed? Not unless you restore the certification through proper channels, I said. It's federal-grade encryption. You can't just reboot it. He was silent for a long moment. Marcus said you threatened the company. I leaned back in my chair. I didn't threaten anyone. I warned him that afternoon the news got worse for them. A leaked memo hit social media. Screenshots of Marcus's fake vendor accounts, his consulting transfers. The story exploded within hours. Hashtags, speculation, investors fleeing like rats from a burning ship. I didn't leak it, but I knew who did. Clara. She'd always had a quiet sense of justice. She didn't owe loyalty to men who built empires on lies. By evening, I watched the local business channel report it like a corporate autopsy. Westline's internal systems remain offline for the 4th day. Sources close to the board confirm an ongoing investigation into mismanagement and financial misconduct. They didn't name Marcus, but they didn't need to. His face was already plastered across every finance blog in the city. I thought about Richard, the CEO, sitting in his office surrounded by chaos, probably wondering how his empire fell apart so fast. He'd call it betrayal, maybe even sabotage. But the truth was simpler. He'd built a company that worshipped the wrong people. When I worked there, I saw it daily. How competence was ignored because it wasn't loud. How men like Marcus got promoted for confidence, not results. I was invisible until they needed a scapegoat. And now, invisibility was my armor. Around 9 p.m., I got one last message from Clara. They're shutting the office tomorrow. CEO resigned. Marcus is under investigation. They're asking if I can reach you. I typed a reply, then deleted it. What could I say? That I was sorry? That I'd warned them? That sometimes justice looks like silence? Instead, I sent, "Take care of yourself, Clara. You deserve better than that place." Then I turned off my phone. Outside, the city was quiet. The streetlights reflected off wet pavement, and in the distance, thunder rolled low and steady. For the first time in years, I felt light, untethered from the constant hum of responsibility. I thought about everything that had happened, the years of unseen work, the long nights patching code no one thanked me for, the constant underestimation. And I realized something simple but profound. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd just stopped saving people who refused to save themselves. The next morning, I opened my laptop to a blank document and typed 3 words at the top. New Beginnings Protocol. It wasn't revenge. It was rebirth. I was going to build something new. Something transparent, fair, and functional. A system where integrity couldn't be overwritten by ego. Westline was collapsing. Yes. But sometimes a system has to fall apart before something stronger can replace it. And maybe that's what I'd been waiting for all along. 3 weeks after Westline collapsed, I got another call. This time from a number I didn't recognize, though something about the area code felt familiar. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Linda Taylor?" a calm voice said. "This is Robert Ames. I used to handle operations at Norvale Industries. We've been following what happened at Westline. I stayed quiet. These kinds of calls had become common lately. Companies sniffing around, trying to see if the woman who brought a giant to its knees would do the same for them." He continued, We're not calling to offer a position. We're building something new, something better. We'd like you to lead the architecture." I smiled faintly. "You do realize my name isn't exactly investor-friendly right now?" "That's exactly why we want you," he said. "You built a system that couldn't be corrupted." "That's rare. We want that kind of backbone here." It was tempting, not because of the money, but because of the promise in his tone. Integrity, something Westline never had. "I'll think about it," I said, then hung up. But as I set the phone down, I realized I already had my answer. I didn't want to go back to fixing someone else's mess. I wanted to build something that couldn't be broken by arrogance again. That night, I sat in my small apartment, the one that had become my silent witness through every sleepless night and crisis, and opened a clean document on my laptop. I named it Aurora, a project I'd been sketching for years. A system that would make corporate structures transparent, traceable, and human-proof. No hidden transfers, no ghost approvals. Every action logged, every permission earned. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was reform. As I wrote, I thought about Marcus, still missing from the public eye. Rumor had it he'd fled the city after his accounts were frozen. Investigators found trails of falsified invoices and consulting contracts under his signature. It was only a matter of time before they caught up. Richard, on the other hand, had resigned. The last article I read said he'd sold his remaining shares and moved to the coast. The company that once boasted of digital transformation leadership had filed for bankruptcy protection, and Clara, she'd landed on her feet. Another firm had hired her almost immediately after the shutdown. She messaged me once, just a short note. "It's different here." They actually listen. "You were right all along." I smiled at that message more than I'd expected to. It was proof that not everything good gets buried under bad leadership. Some people notice. Some people remember. A few days later, I received an email from a journalist. The subject line read, "Interview request. The woman behind Atlas 9. The message was polite, curious. They wanted to clarify misconceptions and tell my side of the story. For a moment, I considered it. Maybe it was time to clear my name, to let people know that I hadn't taken revenge. I'd simply stopped enabling incompetence. But then I closed the email and deleted it. People like Marcus and Richard built their empires on attention. I wasn't going to rebuild mine on the same foundation. Instead, I poured everything into Aurora. Long nights, silent mornings, code that felt like therapy. The difference this time was that I wasn't building it for anyone. I was building it because of everything that happened. By the second week, I had a working prototype. It wasn't flashy, but it was strong. Encrypted with independent key layers, self-auditing, and completely owner-neutral. It couldn't be hijacked by management or disabled by one person's ego. And in the corner of the dashboard, I wrote a line of code that appeared every time the system booted. Integrity is not optional. That was my quiet rebellion. One evening, around midnight, I got another email. This one from Richard. It was short, hesitant, written like a man who'd spent too long rehearsing the words. "Linda, I owe you an apology. I should have listened. We lost everything, and it was our own doing. I know you don't owe me anything, but if you ever decide to build something new, I hope it's not too late for people like me to learn from it." I read it twice before closing my laptop. It didn't make me angry or smug. It just made me sad. For him, for the people who'd worked under him, for how many good employees had been crushed under a system that rewarded all the wrong things. But it also reaffirmed something. Sometimes people only learn when the walls fall down. A month later, I met with Robert Ames and his small team. Not in a boardroom, not in some shiny tower, but in a co-working space with mismatched chairs and real conversation. They wanted to fund Aurora. Not own it, not rebrand it, just help it grow. So I said yes. Not for revenge, not for redemption, but because I finally understood what power really was. Not control, not money, not titles. It was the ability to walk away and start over, and still be whole. As I left that meeting, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. I stopped, looked up, and felt the warmth on my face. For years, I'd lived in the shadow of systems built by others. Now I was building one of my own. And this time, it wouldn't need saving.